For years, Barron Trump lived mostly outside the media spotlight. As the youngest son of former and now current President Donald J. Trump, the American public had watched him grow from a tall, quiet teenager into a reserved young man who rarely made public appearances or political comments. While his siblings Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric had long been vocal on the campaign trail, Barron seemed to prefer staying behind the curtain. But all of that was about to change. It was the year 2025. Donald Trump had returned to the White House, a historic second term that once again sent shockwaves through the political world. While pundits and news networks argued over policy and controversy, something unexpected was brewing behind the scenes. Barron was finding his voice. Though he had just turned 19, Barron had spent the last 2 years studying political theory, communication, and history under private tutors and mentors handpicked by his father. Far from the public eye, he had developed a sharp mind, a unique voice, and an unexpected charisma that even his family hadn't seen coming. The turning point came when the Republican National Committee announced a special youth leadership summit in Washington, D.C. The event was designed to energize the younger base of conservative voters and showcase emerging voices within the party. When the RNC chair approached President Trump about having one of his children make an appearance, Trump shocked everyone by saying, "Let Barron do it." The announcement sent a ripple through the media. Barron Trump to speak at Youth Summit, the headlines read. Will the quietest Trump finally speak out? Another asked. Social media buzzed with speculation. Some expected a stiff, awkward speech. Others predicted a carefully scripted message. No one expected what would happen next. As the day of the summit arrived, the Capitol was buzzing. Thousands of young conservatives packed into the Ronald Reagan Building auditorium waving flags and wearing MAGA hats. News cameras from every major network lined the back wall. The stage was grand but simple, with a large American flag draped behind the podium. It was a Saturday morning, but the energy felt like a Friday night at a championship football game. Backstage, Barron stood silently in a navy blue suit tailored perfectly to his towering 6 feet 7 inches frame. His mother, Melania, stood beside him, offering a soft smile and a kiss on the cheek. "You're ready," she whispered. Donald Trump approached and put a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "Speak from the heart," he said, "and show them who you are." Barron nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the stage. The applause was polite at first, even hesitant. The crowd didn't know what to expect. A 19-year-old? This was Washington, D.C., not high school debate club. But the moment Barron stood behind the podium and adjusted the microphone, everything changed. He looked out over the crowd, paused for a long moment, and smiled. Not nervously, but confidently. "Good morning, America," he began. "My name is Barron Trump, and today I'm not here as the president's son. I'm here as a young American who believes our generation has something powerful to say and something even more powerful to do." The room fell into a stunned silence. No cue cards. No teleprompter. Just him. And the nation would soon realize this wasn't just a speech. It was a moment that would be talked about for decades. Barron Trump stood tall behind the podium, calm and poised. The crowd, initially unsure, leaned forward in their seats. Even the most skeptical reporters in the back row began scribbling furiously into their notebooks, eyes wide. "In the last few years," Barron continued, "I've listened. I've watched. And like many young Americans, I've asked myself some big questions that go beyond red or blue, conservative or liberal." He paused, his voice clear and steady, the kind of voice that doesn't shout but commands attention. What does it mean to be an American in 2025? What does it mean to be free, to be united, to be courageous in a time when division is sold like a product and outrage is used to score likes instead of progress? Gasps could be heard from the audience. It wasn't just what he was saying, it was how. There was no anger in his voice. No attack lines. No childish barbs. Instead, Barron Trump spoke like a man who had seen the ugliness of politics and still believed in its potential to do good. He continued, "We are the most connected generation in history. We have the world in our pockets. We can speak to someone in Tokyo in real time or start a business from our bedrooms. But we're also the most anxious, most medicated, and most uncertain generation in modern American history." Why? That question lingered in the air like a challenge. My generation has been told we're victims. That we're either too privileged to speak or too oppressed to rise. That everything is someone else's fault. But I believe the truth is very different. Barron's eyes scanned the crowd. He wasn't reading a script. He had memorized every word, but more importantly, he believed every syllable. We are not victims. We are Americans. And we are responsible for the future we inherit. A wave of applause erupted. It began with a few claps near the front but then spread like a wildfire. A few young people stood up, fists in the air. Others clapped with cautious amazement as if unsure whether it was okay to be inspired by someone they thought would just echo his father. Barron held up a hand to calm the crowd. Let me be clear, I don't agree with everything my father says. I admire him, yes. I respect him as a leader. But I also believe that our future won't be won by repeating the past. It'll be won by learning from it. That line hit like a hammer. Even political analysts backstage turned to each other in shock. He was separating himself. Not attacking but defining. Barron shared a story about his time studying abroad in Israel during a summer exchange. He talked about meeting Palestinian teenagers, Israeli soldiers, and families who had lived through bombings and still held hope. They didn't see each other as enemies. They saw each other as human beings first. And I asked myself, why can't we do that in America? Another burst of applause. This time louder. Barron smiled slightly. He was just getting started. I've seen how the media works. I've watched how they try to mold a narrative about me. They said I was just a quiet kid. A political accessory. Some even called me uninterested or clueless. But let me say this now, I know exactly who I am. And I know where I stand. And then he pointed out into the audience. I stand with the kids in broken schools who are told to keep their heads down and shut up. I stand with the young workers drowning in debt while politicians argue over nonsense. I stand with the small-town Americans who feel like they've been forgotten. I stand with the families who pray every night that this country won't fall apart before their children grow up. You could hear the crowd murmur with approval, growing louder with each line. It wasn't just a speech anymore. It was a rallying cry. And to those who think I'm just here because of my last name, you're right. My last name got me to this stage. But only I can decide what I do with it. The crowd jumped to their feet. A full standing ovation, cheering, clapping, even some wiping away tears. News cameras zoomed in. Social media exploded. Hashtag Barron Trump speech was trending within 5 minutes. Backstage, Donald Trump leaned toward Melania, stunned. Where did that come from? Melania just smiled. He's always had it. You just never let him show it. The moment Barron Trump left the stage, the entire auditorium was electric. Chants of USA, USA rang out from the crowd as he raised his hand in a simple wave and walked off with the same calm demeanor he had entered with. But behind the composure was a storm of emotions. For the first time, he had taken a real stand and the entire country was watching. Backstage, journalists scrambled to get reactions from party leaders and attendees. One young delegate from Texas said that wasn't just good, that was presidential. A conservative commentator on Newsmax immediately called it the speech of the year, while even a stunned anchor on CNN reluctantly admitted there's real power in what we just saw. Within hours, clips of the speech were everywhere. YouTube uploads racked up millions of views before the sun went down. Influencers, podcasters, even comedians, everyone was talking about Barron. His Instagram following doubled overnight. X, formerly Twitter, was flooded with a mix of admiration, skepticism, and pure shock. Fox News ran a segment titled Barron Trump Breaks Out, The Quiet Son Steps into the Spotlight. The New York Times, while cautious in tone, published a headline, A New Voice from an Old Name, Barron Trump Surprises at Youth Summit. Even late-night shows had to acknowledge the impact. One host joked, "Is it weird that I now want this Trump to run for something?" But perhaps the most striking reaction came from young Americans themselves. TikTok, which had long been a battleground of political memes and Gen Z sarcasm, was suddenly filled with clips of teens lip-syncing to Barron's speech, editing inspirational music behind his quotes, and even starting discussions about patriotism and responsibility. "I never cared about politics before," said a 17-year-old in one video. "But Barron Trump just made me feel like I should." That's when things really started to shift. Colleges reached out asking if Barron would speak on their campuses. Youth organizations across the country wanted him involved. A conservative think tank even offered him an honorary fellowship to help shape Gen Z political messaging. But Barron wasn't interested in cashing in. When asked for a follow-up interview by a major media outlet, he simply replied, "I said what I needed to say. Now I'm listening again." And that made people respect him even more. The White House itself, meanwhile, was navigating an unexpected wave of attention. President Donald Trump, known for dominating headlines himself, was unusually reserved in his reaction, at least publicly. Behind closed doors, however, sources said the president was proud beyond words, even joking to staff, "Well, Looks like I better watch my seat in 2028. In a private family dinner the following evening, Trump toasted his son. You made America proud, he said. And you made your old man realize you're not a kid anymore. Barron smiled, but didn't say much. He wasn't interested in bragging or celebrating. He was already thinking ahead, about how to use his platform for more than just a moment in the spotlight. He turned to Melania later that night and asked quietly, "Do you think they'll expect more now?" She nodded. "Yes, they will. But that's not a burden. It's a calling." Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the buzz among lawmakers grew louder. Some speculated he could become the next face of the Republican Party's youth wing. Others wondered if he'd run for office someday, or at least be a major influence in reshaping the party's image. A few older political operatives scoffed at the idea. It was just one speech, they said. Let's not get carried away. But they were missing the point. It wasn't just what Barron said, it was how he made people feel. At a time when so many Americans were tired of division, shouting, and negativity, here was someone who spoke with calm, conviction, and clarity. And he was only 19. For millions across the country, a new kind of Trump had arrived. And whether he wanted it or not, a movement was beginning. 3 days after the speech, Barron Trump's life changed overnight. While his last name had always carried weight, for the first time he was the reason people were talking. Not his father, not his family named him. The emails flooded in. Offers to speak at conservative events, to headline youth rallies, to co-author books on patriotism and leadership. Yet Barron remained quiet. No flashy press tours. No merch drops or podcast launches. He gave the media nothing more than his original speech, and that silence only made the interest in him grow stronger. Political strategists scrambled to figure out the phenomenon. Cable news ran endless panels. Is this the beginning of a Gen Z conservative awakening? One anchor asked. Another responded, no one expected Barron Trump to be the voice that would cut through the noise. But here we are. Behind the scenes, Barron stayed grounded. He continued his private studies at Georgetown, where he was enrolled under a quiet name, surrounded by a few trusted classmates and faculty members. Despite the national buzz, he insisted on normalcy, attending lectures, working out at the campus gym, studying late into the night. One of his professors, Dr. Ellen Harmon, a respected constitutional law scholar, later said, "He's the most thoughtful and serious student I've taught in 20 years. He's not just absorbing knowledge, he's shaping it." Meanwhile, young people across the country started quoting his speech in classrooms, church youth groups, and student government meetings. The line, "We are not victims. We are Americans," was printed on t-shirts, banners, even classroom walls. But Barron didn't copyright the phrase. He didn't need to. He had struck a chord. The RNC quickly moved to involve him further, floating the idea of a national America Next tour featuring Barron as the face of a youth conservative revival. But he was hesitant. He didn't want to be a puppet for anyone, not even for his father's party. Instead, he crafted a different idea. At a small press conference held at a Washington library, Barron appeared again, this time casually dressed, sleeves rolled up, notebook in hand. Reporters leaned forward. "I'm starting a new initiative," he said simply. "It's called Voices of the Future. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about listening to young Americans, conservative, liberal, and independent, who feel left out of the conversation." The announcement stunned the press. "You're working with liberals?" one reporter asked, confused. "I'm working with Americans," Barron replied. "People my age aren't looking to be labeled. They're looking to be heard." Within a week, Voices of the Future had its own website, a growing email list, and partnerships with youth organizations across 30 states. Local town halls began popping up. Barron sometimes appeared in person, sometimes virtually. At each event, he let others speak first. He listened, took notes, asked questions, and when he spoke, it wasn't with political jargon, but with purpose. At a gathering in Des Moines, Iowa, Barron sat with a high school student who lost her brother to fentanyl. In Atlanta, he met with young veterans facing homelessness. In Portland, he spoke with entrepreneurs struggling to start businesses under regulatory red tape. In every city, he echoed the same message. Leadership isn't about talking louder. It's about listening deeper. The media didn't know what to do with him. He couldn't be boxed in. He wasn't angry or performative. He wasn't polarizing. He was hopeful. And hope was dangerous to the political class because hope inspires action. Soon, whispers began, could Barron run for office? Would he follow in his father's footsteps? Is this the beginning of something bigger? One Sunday morning, he appeared on Face the Nation. The host asked bluntly, "Barron, the country wants to know, are you planning to run for anything?" Barron smiled. "I'm 19. I'm planning to pass my economics final." The audience laughed, but there was a gleam in his eye that said maybe one day. That same week, President Trump held a rally in Pennsylvania. Thousands packed into a stadium, waving flags, chanting slogans. But this time, something new happened. As the president walked on stage, the crowd spontaneously erupted. "Barron! Barron! Barron!" Donald Trump paused. He smiled, slightly surprised. Then he chuckled into the mic. "Careful now," he said. "He might be the Trump you vote for next." The stadium exploded. The chant "Barron! Barron! Barron!" still echoed in the news cycle days after President Trump's Pennsylvania rally. It had been spontaneous, unscripted, and undeniable. Across the country, young conservatives and moderates began gravitating to something they hadn't seen in years: authenticity. Barron Trump wasn't trying to be the next Donald Trump. He wasn't rehearsing culture war battle lines or shouting at cable news hosts. He was doing something rare: listening, reflecting, and offering hope. Washington insiders didn't know what to make of it. Some dismissed it as a passing fad. "He's too young," they scoffed. "He hasn't earned his stripes." Others, more politically astute, saw the writing on the wall. This wasn't a fad, it was a groundswell. And it was growing. One evening, a viral podcast featuring both conservative and liberal college students aired a full episode titled "Barron Trump, the Voice of a Generation?" A young liberal student from California said, "Look, I don't agree with him on everything, but he speaks like a real person. And honestly, I trust him more than most people in D.C." Meanwhile, at the White House, President Trump watched the phenomenon unfold with a mix of fatherly pride and strategic intrigue. In a private meeting with his closest advisors, he said, "He's not just my son anymore. He's becoming his own leader." But Barron wasn't getting lost in the hype. In fact, he often pushed back against it. In an op-ed published in the Wall Street Journal titled "Don't Follow Me, Find Your Own Voice," Barron wrote, "America doesn't need more idols. It needs more leaders. And leadership isn't about fame, it's about service. If my speech inspired you, don't just repost it. Do something. Help someone. Start something. Build something. Be the solution instead of waiting for one." The op-ed went viral. Again, even major corporations took notice. One tech CEO tweeted, "We need more leaders who talk like this and less who scream on TV." But then came the moment that sealed it all. 6 weeks after Barron's original speech, he was invited to speak at the National Youth Civic Summit, a televised event broadcast across every major network aimed at empowering young Americans. It had historically featured political figures, activists, and scholars. But this year, the closing keynote was Barron Trump. The venue? The Kennedy Center. The audience? Thousands of students from every state in the nation. As Barron walked onto the stage, dressed in a simple suit, no tie, no teleprompter, a hush fell over the crowd. He began. "6 weeks ago, I stood on a stage and shared my heart. I didn't expect it to resonate the way it did. But maybe that tells us something, that this generation is hungry for truth, for unity, for purpose. I'm not here to campaign. I'm not here to divide. I'm here to remind us that being American isn't about agreeing on everything. It's about believing in something bigger than ourselves." He spoke of duty, sacrifice, and honor. He talked about young people starting businesses, mentoring kids, standing up against drug abuse, and leading their communities, not waiting for Washington to do it for them. "I'm not a perfect leader. I'm not even a leader yet. I'm a student of history of people of this country. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: America's best days won't come from Washington. They'll come from you." Then he ended with the words that would be etched into history. "We don't inherit greatness. We build it. And it starts with us right here, right now. So let's stop waiting and start leading." The crowd erupted. Another standing ovation. Longer. Louder. Raw. It wasn't just admiration, it was belief. Social media exploded again, but this time with something different. Not just praise or applause. People were organizing. Communities launched youth leadership clubs named after his Voices of the Future initiative. Donations poured in for civic education programs. Churches, schools, nonprofits, even celebrities joined the chorus. Something had shifted, and in a quiet moment backstage, after the thunder of applause faded, Barron sat alone with his mother, Melania. She placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You've started something bigger than all of us." He nodded, his eyes steady. "It's not about me, Mom. It's about them." She smiled. "Then you've already won. That night, as the nation replayed his words on every screen, Barron Trump returned to his dorm. No entourage, no media, just a young man with a journal full of notes, a backpack over his shoulder, and a future that no longer belonged to his name, but to his vision. And somewhere deep in America's heart, a new generation felt the spark, not of a politician, but of a leader,